Once upon a time, there was a poor man with so many children that when his wife gave birth to another child, there was no man left in town to ask to be the godfather. The poor man was quite distressed, but when he laid his head down to sleep that night, he dreamt he was to go outside the town gate the next morning and ask the first person he met to be godfather. When he awoke, he quickly dressed and made his way to the town gate, waiting there for any stranger to pass by. As it happened, the first person to appear was Death himself, and the poor man called out to him, "Death, will you agree to be my son's godfather?" Death nodded. "I will stand sponsor to your child. I'll see him trained as a doctor. With me as his friend, he will never be in need." The poor man was satisfied with what he heard, and liked that Death was fair and did not discriminate between rich and poor when it came time to fetch a person. "Very well, my son will be baptized tomorrow. See that you arrive at the right time." The next morning, Death came and held the child during the baptism, then disappeared, only returning again once the child had grown into a young man. Taking him into the forest, Death said, "Now you are to become a doctor, and you must listen to what I say. When you are called to a sick person and you see me standing at his head, it is a sign the man will live." Death handed the young man a small vial. "Let him smell the vapors of this bottle and rub the salve on his feet. Then he will become well again. But if you come to a man and find me standing at his feet, you must not try to cure him, for he is mine and I will take him." The young man followed Death's instructions, going on to become a famous doctor. He had only to take one look at a person and he would know if the man would live or die. One day he was called to the king, who was lying in bed sick with an illness no one could cure. When the doctor entered the room, he saw Death standing at the king's feet, and he knew the vapors of the bottle would be of no use. But the king was well loved, and the doctor was cunning. He took hold of the king's bed and turned it around so that Death stood at the head. The plan worked as the doctor hoped, with the king becoming well again. However, when the doctor returned home, he found Death there, glowering at him with fierce looks. "If you dare trick me again, you shall not live to deceive me another time." Only a few days later, the king's beautiful daughter became ill, and nobody in the kingdom could aid her. Her father wept night and day, and in his desperation to save her, he announced that any man who cured her would be allowed to marry her. So the doctor came and found Death standing at the princess's feet, but he was so enchanted by her beauty that he forgot all of Death's warnings and turned the princess's bed around, letting her smell the vapors of the bottle as he rubbed the soles of her feet with salve. No sooner did he return home than Death stood there with a terrible look in his eyes. He seized his godson, carrying him to an underground cave where 1,000 candles burned. "Take a look," Death commanded. "These are the candles of the living, and this light over here, whose flame barely burns, this is your life." He snuffed out the candle, then claimed his godson for eternity. Okay, I cheated a little bit on this one because the Grimms have two different stories that are super similar. One is called The Godfather and the other is called Godfather Death. And they're essentially the same idea, that there's a godfather who's death. But since I didn't want to animate two stories that are basically the same thing, I kind of cherry-picked what I liked from both of the stories. So the beginning comes from The Godfather, and most of it comes from Godfather Death. The very ending, it just ended weird. It just kind of trailed off. So I kind of tied it up a little bit and made up my own. I didn't make up my own ending. I just rounded it out a little bit. It's not a true Grimm story. It's a mashup of a couple different stories and my own creativity. I'll go ahead and put links to both The Godfather and Godfather Death down in the comments so that you guys can read the originals. And I'd love to hear your take on what the moral of the story is, so go ahead and add it in the comments below. Bye!